Program introductory webinar. I just wanted to go over a couple of things real quick as we sort of get started here. First, we're going to be taking questions on the attendee chat section of the webinar. So if you look up in the top left-hand corner of your computer screen and hit on the attendee chat button, it will provide you an opportunity to ask questions, type in questions there, which I'm happy to answer at the end of the webinar. I'm going to start by running through about 30 slides today. If you have questions, like I said, go ahead and type them in on the attendee chat section, and at the end, I will go back and answer as many questions as y'all have. We're going to start today by doing a little bit of an introduction to advocacy and talking a little bit about sort of what CIRB does in Washington, D.C. And basically, our job here is to advocate for a strong crop insurance program. And we do that by educating thought leaders, educating members of Congress and the administration here in Washington, D.C. Our membership at CIRB is a combination of approved insurance companies and the private reinsurance community and the brokers that are the go-between there. However, we are not the only members of the private sector delivery system that are working on advocacy issues here in Washington, D.C. Obviously, there's CIRB, NCIS. Many of you are familiar with NCIS, and while their role is less on advocacy, they do more on the research and technical side of the program. They also represent all of the AIPs. There's also ASA, which represents companies and agents and advocates here in Washington, D.C. And then there are 3 different groups that represent just agents, and those are SEPA, IIABA, or we call them the Big I, and PIA. So we have a lot of good friends here in Washington, D.C. In addition to the work we do for CIRB, we also spearhead a much broader crop insurance coalition. And as you can see here, the list of coalition partners is long, and this isn't even an extensive list. Right now we have more than 100 groups that are part of that coalition. It's everyone from the commodity organizations that you would expect to see, the lending community, ag input providers, conservation organizations, and all of the folks who are engaged in private sector delivery. And when we have an issue here in D.C., these are the folks we turn to help with grassroots efforts, to help fight bills that we don't want, to help us get a farm bill passed at the end of the day. These are folks that we have regular contact with, and we share all of our advocacy materials with these folks. So taking just a bit of a step back and talking a little bit about the basics of crop insurance, and I know some of you are going to know this material inside and out probably better than I do, but just to be sure we're all on the same playing field as we're discussing the program, crop insurance is unique in that it is a public-private partnership. So it's not just about a government agency. In fact, the Risk Management Agency at USDA, RMA, has less than 500 staff and is one of the smallest agencies within USDA. And that's because the private sector helps with the delivery of the program. And we have 16 companies. I think we're back up to 17 now. That's an ever-changing number. We have 18,000 agents and adjusters across the countryside that help sell the product, adjust the losses, and work directly with those farmers. And we sell 1.18 million policies across the countryside every single year. If you dig a little bit deeper and look at some of the numbers in terms of crop insurance, this pie chart represents all of the Farm Bill spending. And as you can see, nutrition is by far the biggest program. That's a piece of the Farm Bill. But one of the other important things to see here is also that crop insurance is the second biggest piece of the pie. In fact, crop insurance is now larger than the commodity programs that have traditionally serviced farmers in the countryside when they have issues. If you peel back a layer of the onion and you take a look more specifically at what money is spent within the crop insurance program, you can see here that the vast majority of the dollars are premium subsidy. Almost 70% of the money that goes into the crop insurance program is premium subsidies for farmers. And I use the word subsidy here in this friendly audience, but I will say that when we talk about premium subsidies on Capitol Hill or with the administration, we actually call them premium discounts. And we think that's appropriate because what we found was that people actually thought that farmers were getting a check from the government for their crop insurance to purchase their crop insurance. And so it's our way of just sort of ingraining folks in the mindset that farmers get a bill for crop insurance, not a check. And so we call it a premium discount here in D.C. Then, of course, underwriting gains and the private sector delivery system through A&O are also a piece of that pie chart. Going on to the next slide, I wanted to just give you a brief comparison of what crop insurance looked like in 1998 and what crop insurance looked like just last year. And as you can see, no matter what measurement you use, the crop insurance program has grown significantly. We cover more acres, we insure more liability, in terms of liability, fourfold over what we did in 1998. And the real key here is that growth in the crop insurance program has meant that we no longer have ad hoc disaster assistance in this country. So we used to have almost annual calls for ad hoc disaster assistance for agriculture, for various sectors and various regions, and even with the 2012 disaster and drought, we did not see any calls for ad hoc disaster assistance, and that's because of the growth and the strength of the crop insurance program. And a lot of that occurred in the year 2000 with the passage of the Ag Risk Protection Act, which I will get back to a little bit later. So why did the program evolve? Again, it largely came out of this passage of the Ag Risk Protection Act, ARPA, in the year 2000. And through that bill, there was an increase in farmer premium supports. So it made higher levels of coverage for farmers more affordable and more accessible. It also allowed for the development of new policies and new products, which obviously allowed the program to sink deeper into agriculture and not just be for a few commodities. It also expanded into new coverage areas like specialty crops and livestock through PRF. And a lot of times we saw disaster assistance being linked to crop insurance participation. I understand that folks are not necessarily seeing the change in slides. I'm getting a couple of messages here. Is that a problem that everyone's having, or is that just a problem that a couple folks are having? It looks like that's a problem everyone's having, which is interesting because I'm moving along and my slide's just fine. I'm going to go on hold for 1 second while we try to fix this technical difficulty. I apologize for that in advance. Just give me 1 minute. Hi guys, I'm back. Apologies for that. Sarah Hubbard on our staff just sent a link. Our understanding is that some people are actually seeing the slides, no problem, and some folks are not. So we're going to give you two options. Those who are seeing the slides, just continue on with me. And for those who aren't, there's now a link in the attendee chat section where it'll actually take you to the PowerPoint presentation. Also, just so you guys know, we're recording this and we'll be sending that out later, and we can also send the slides to folks at a later date as well. We'll be sure you get these materials in hand any way you cut it. So apologies for those technical difficulties all. I am now on a slide for those following along, not necessarily with me on the screen, on a slide called Program Evolution, Crop Insurance and the 2014 Farm Bill. So in addition to a lot of the changes that were made in the Ag Risk Protection Act in 2000, the program has continued to evolve, and several changes were made to the program in the 2014 Farm Bill. In fact, crop insurance probably played a bigger role in the 2014 Farm Bill than it has in any piece of legislation since ARPA passed in 2000. One of those changes, for example, was SCO, the supplemental coverage option, which allows farmers to stack a county-wide crop insurance policy on top of their individual policy. The idea being that that gives farmers a way to buy up higher levels of insurance in a less expensive way. The bill also included what we call SRA sideboards, and you're going to be hearing a lot about that coming up into this next Farm Bill. Essentially, in 2010, USDA cut about $6 billion out of the crop insurance program through changes in the standard reinsurance agreement that basically sets the operating standards between crop insurance companies and the U.S. government. What the sideboard language did in the 2014 Farm Bill is it essentially prevents USDA by taking money out of the program through the next standard reinsurance agreement. It ensures that even if there are changes in the standard reinsurance agreement, that money isn't moved outside of crop insurance entirely. Other changes in the Farm Bill, going on to the next slide, stacks, which you've probably heard a lot about. The cotton program was ruled against in the WTO, their Title I farm program. So the cotton organizations wanted to move to an all-crop insurance program instead. They called that program stacks. It was very similar to SCO. They're still having some issues with that program, and we might see additional changes to that in the next Farm Bill. It also allowed for the splitting of irrigated and non-irrigated acres for enterprise units, which is a whole new concept in crop insurance. It hadn't been allowed in the past, and farmers were forced to combine their irrigated and non-irrigated acres. We did manage to avoid having adjusted gross income limits connected to crop insurance, even though we had to go through several battles on that during the last Farm Bill. And we also included conservation compliance. So now, in order for farmers to be eligible for crop insurance premium discounts, they actually have to meet highly erodible lands and wetlands requirements for conservation. Going on to the next slide, the private sector delivery system has undergone quite a few cuts in recent years. I thought it would be important context to just sort of lay out what those cuts have been. In 2008, in the 2008 Farm Bill, about $2 billion was cut from the program by reducing company delivery payments and delaying payments to companies. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the last standard reinsurance agreement cut about $6 billion out of crop insurance by capping company delivery payments and agent commissions and reducing the company expected rate of return. In 2012, there was a major re-rate for several commodities, which reduced premiums in most states and therefore took money out of crop insurance companies, and the private sector delivery system as a whole. There is still one small piece of litigation pending about that. And then in 2015, there was an attempt to cut private sector delivery by an additional $3 billion by reducing the target rate of return from 14.5%, as it was set in the 2011 Standard Reinsurance Agreement, down to 8.9%. Thankfully, through the work of the coalition and some of our champions on Capitol Hill, we were able to reverse that cut before it was implemented. So I want to shift gears a little bit and take a look at where we stand today in terms of Washington, D.C., and what the players are saying here in D.C. as we head into a farm bill. I don't have to tell you guys that there are folks out there that oppose crop insurance and they want to make devastating cuts and changes to the program. Two of those opponents on the left is the Environmental Working Group, and on the far right is the Heritage Foundation. And I pulled these quote bill just to show you how similar what a group to the far left and a group to the far right were saying about crop insurance. They had very similar messaging around what they wanted to do to crop insurance and the cuts they wanted to make. Both of those groups do continue to be opponents as we head into this next Farm Bill discussion. I will say that we're probably a secondary target for the Environmental Working Group during this Farm Bill. They have other ideas on regulation and conservation that they're more focused on. But Heritage Foundation has really doubled down on crop insurance and wanting to see adjustments to crop insurance. You can see here a list of some of the studies they've come out recently that clearly show that they have a target over crop insurance as we head into this Farm Bill. And they've put out a Farm Bill study with a list of ideas of ways to cut the program. If you take a look at the administration, I know I get asked a lot if this administration is going to be good or bad for crop insurance. And the honest answer is it's a little muddled. At the presidential level, at the top of the top, you know, the president's only been talking about ag issues at a really high level. He's been focused on an anti-regulatory message primarily, and he hasn't gotten in the weeds. He's not made any really direct comments about crop insurance. That middle picture there is actually Mick Mulvaney, who's the director of the Office of Management and Budget. This is the guy who puts together the presidential budget every year. This year, when he put together that budget, he included $28.6 billion in cuts to crop insurance. Just to put that in perspective, the last administration, in the last year of their administration, proposed an $18 billion cut. So this even went above and beyond what we saw in the previous administration. He got those cuts, got to that $28.6 billion number by proposing adjusted gross income limits of $500,000. He also proposed a premium assistance cap of $40,000 and proposed completely eliminating the harvest price option. Thankfully, here in Washington, D.C., presidential budgets tend to find their way to the garbage can pretty quickly. So none of those ideas really took hold and became part of the congressional budgets that were considered. Finally, there's Secretary Perdue, Sonny Perdue, and he has been much more positive about crop insurance than what we've seen out of the Office of Management and Budget. He has said that farmers need a safety net. They need one that allows them to follow the market. He agrees that crop insurance is extremely important and has specifically called out the importance for specialty crop producers. He has made some comments about wanting to be sure folks understand that if you invest $1 in crop insurance, that doesn't mean you're supposed to get $1.10 back. In other words, crop insurance needs to remain actuarially sound. Thankfully, we have some fantastic champions in Congress. If you go to the next slide. Chairman Roberts and Ranking Member Stabenow in the Senate, and Chairman Conaway and Ranking Member Peterson on the House side have been stalwarts for the program. Senator Roberts was actually one of the key writers of the Ag Risk Protection Act in 2000. He says time and again that crop insurance is really his #1 priority. And so we are going to be blessed by really good champions and really great folks leading the charge to finish this next Farm Bill. In terms of the process of that Farm Bill and what we're looking at, really up to this point we've been building up the congressional record. We've been having hearings about the Farm Bill. We've been having listening sessions in the countryside. And both the House and Senate have talked about wanting to spend the next several months getting the Farm Bill written. Both Chairman Conaway and Chairman Roberts have discussed possibly wanting to get the Farm Bill done this year, if not early next year. That leaves the Ag Committee a pretty significant cushion before the Farm Bill expires in September 30th of 2018. So they do have a much longer time frame before they reach deadlines and have to pass a new Farm Bill. And it's probably worth noting here that crop insurance does not expire. So even if the Farm Bill expires and a lot of the conservation and Title I farm programs and other programs expire, that doesn't apply to crop insurance. Crop insurance is actually a part of permanent law. But Congress does have a lot to do before they can actually get a Farm Bill passed. I mean, they need to draft legislation. It's going to have to be marked up in the various committees. They're going to have to get floor time to debate the bills on the floor in both the House and the Senate. So there's still a lot of work to be done. There's a very busy congressional schedule right now with a lot of controversies. Once we head into 2018, the 2018 election process will also impact what can be done legislatively and what can be done in a farm bill. And of course, we don't have a lot of appointees down at USDA right now, political appointees, that can sort of help navigate this process or even implement a farm bill if we were to get one passed in very short order. Just because we have a lot of really great friends on Capitol Hill doesn't mean we don't have our naysayers. As the Ag Committee begins to write a farm bill, it's typical for members to introduce what we call marker bills here in D.C. And basically that just means they're going to introduce legislation with ideas that they want to advance in the Farm Bill discussion. And we've seen some of those bills be introduced that are very detrimental to crop insurance. One is the AFFIRM Act, which we like to call the Everything in the Kitchen Sink Act. It's been introduced by Senators Flake and Shaheen in the Senate and by Congressman Kind and Sensenbrenner on the House side. It proposes adjusted gross income limits, premium caps, capping administrative and operating expenses, getting rid of that sideboard language that we discussed earlier and is so important, reducing target rates of return. Literally every bad idea that's ever been considered for crop insurance, they threw into one bill. And the worry isn't that this bill is actually going to move through Congress. The worry is that this will be a roadmap for people who want to take money out of crop insurance during the Farm Bill, and this gives them ideas for amendments that they can file that we will have to fight during that process. In addition to the AFFIRM Act, Congressman Blumenauer from Oregon has a Farm Bill white paper that he's going to be advancing that also includes some very similar bad ideas like reducing the target rate of return for companies and premium assistance caps. Also, here just within the last few days, we've seen a new bill be introduced that would cut the rate of return for companies from 14.5% to 9.6%. That was introduced by Senators Flake and Shaheen in the Senate again, and Congressman Kind again on the House side. And this 9.6% number is actually based off of a recommendation from the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, in a study that they put out here within the last few weeks. So you can see a little bit of additional momentum building for this idea that we should cut companies and cut their rate of return. So if we sort of take stock of where we are in Congress today and we take stock of what kind of advocacy work we're going to need to be doing over the next few months as we debate a farm bill, one of the things that really sticks out is that we have, between the House and the Senate, more than 150 members of Congress who have never voted on a crop insurance amendment before. They are so new, they haven't been here for a farm bill, so we might have an idea of where they stand on crop insurance, but we actually don't have a voting record for them on crop insurance. So that means we have 150 offices that we need to educate and really bird dog as we head into this next farm bill. In addition, there are a lot of members that were not around in 2000 when the Ag Risk Protection Act was passed and debated. So they don't remember the discussion around the importance of strengthening the crop insurance program and moving away from disaster assistance. So that institutional knowledge, that historical knowledge isn't there. In fact, we only have 4 members of the House Ag Committee and 4 members of the Senate Ag Committee that were actually around in 2000 when that legislation was passed. And I think it's important to think about educating 150 members and having to be really hands-on in that process, because member votes on crop insurance aren't always easily predicted as they are on perhaps some other issues. Crop insurance isn't really a Republican versus Democrat thing. It's not really a rural versus urban thing. And you can see that in some of the votes that were taken during the last Farm Bill. Congressman Kind, who I've mentioned several times, had a very negative crop insurance amendment taken to the floor during the 2013 Farm Bill. We narrowly defeated it. But if you look at the vote breakdown, there were Republicans that voted for that amendment to cut crop insurance, and there were Democrats that voted for that amendment to cut crop insurance. So being a Republican or Democrat was not a good predictor for voting behavior. Same goes for rural versus urban. Using a different example, if you look at the Coburn-Durbin Adjusted Gross Income Limit Amendment that was on the Senate floor in 2012, what you can see a lot of rural ag-dominated states like Alabama, Texas, Indiana, and Iowa, where we have had senators that actually voted against us and voted for an AGI limit on crop insurance. Conversely, we saw folks in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Virginia, and Hawaii that you wouldn't normally think of perhaps as friends to rural America or friends to crop insurance, who voted with us on that amendment and were supportive of crop insurance. So again, without being able to use easy predictors like party or rural versus urban, it makes that education process of members of Congress even more important, because essentially every vote is up for grabs. So what are some of the key issues we're going to have to deal with in this Farm Bill? Really, there are 3 buckets. The folks who oppose crop insurance are relatively predictable in that they tend to go after one of 3 areas when they look to cut the program. The first is cuts to premium assistance and those premium discounts. Remember in the pie chart that it is the biggest piece of the pie in terms of money in the crop insurance program. So when folks are looking to get money out of the program quickly and find savings quickly, it's an easy target. Some folks have focused on harvest price options. Some folks have just focused on an overall cut to premium discount. The specific approach varies, but cuts to premium assistance will be considered and will be on the table during this Farm Bill. The second bucket is means testing, and that really falls into 2 categories. One is adjusted gross income caps, and the other is premium assistance caps on farmers. And then, of course, there are the cuts to the private sector delivery system, whether it's cuts to A&O, cuts to the target rate of return, which seems to be the cut du jour that folks have focused on. We know that we're probably going to face challenges on that side as well. So what are we doing here at CIRB? First, we're starting off with trying to build up a really good offense. We're not sitting back on our heels and waiting for the fights to come to us. We're trying to be very, very proactive. Part of that is building the coalition that I mentioned earlier. Part of that is proactively getting on the Hill and educating members, particularly those new members, about crop insurance. We've also started building out a lot of materials that we know we're going to need during the Farm Bill debate, and we know we're going to need them in very short order. So we're being proactive about developing those materials. And as ELPs, you're going to see a lot of these materials over the coming months. You can also get to them on the CIRB website. But it includes things like a packet of myth versus fact documents, where essentially we sat down as a coalition and highlighted everything in the EWG Farm Bill studies and the Heritage Farm Bill studies that we took issue with, that we either thought used outdated data or wasn't complete data. And we built out fact sheets to basically counteract those messages. And we've been using those on Capitol Hill already. We've also built out state fact sheets so that we have some really quick one-pagers on every single state and what crop insurance means to those states. And then we've also been using those materials to do a weekly social media toolkit that you guys will also be seeing. It'll be your opportunity to tweet about crop insurance or do Facebook posts about crop insurance that are proactive and really positive. Of course, we know at some point in time we're going to need a defense. We know that at some point in time we're going to have an amendment on the floor or an amendment in the committee that we're going to have to actually whip votes for and be sure that we defeat. And that's where our grassroots outreach is really going to come in. It's going to be all about leveraging that coalition and getting them action alerts, being sure that we're using letters and phone calls and Twitter and Facebook to get out the good word about crop insurance. And that's where we're going to be able to use those myth versus fact documents and the state fact sheets and those social media toolkits to respond quickly. Because a lot of times here in D.C., you don't have a lot of notice when a vote comes up. You can do a lot of prep work and you can get your ducks in a row, but when an amendment pops on the floor, sometimes you don't have more than 24 hours, 48 hours to really to do your work and defeat that amendment. So I thought it might be good just to go do a quick overview of what the legislative agenda sort of looks like while you're going to be ELPs. For the rest of this year, you're going to see the Ag Committee spending a lot of time trying to wrap up USDA nominations. Obviously, we only have a Secretary of Agriculture right now in a position that requires Senate confirmation. So that's going to begin next week with a Senate confirmation hearing for Deputy Secretary Sinskey, hopefully Deputy Secretary Sinskey, and Ted McKinney as the Undersecretary for Foreign Ag. We're also going to be continuing the appropriations process. September 30th is the end of the fiscal year here. We just passed a continuing resolution in D.C. that now puts the bigger fight off until December 8th. We're also going to be looking at a potential budget. And the budget and appropriations processes are both opportunities for our opponents to offer amendments that would cut crop insurance. So we keep a really close eye on those processes. The fate of this next budget is a little uncertain right now. They've passed a budget out of the House Budget Committee, but it hasn't gone to the floor. The Senate Budget Committee has been a little wishy-washy on whether or not they're actually even going to consider a budget. So again, we're monitoring that process, and we'll be ready to activate if a threat arises. There's also the potential of an infrastructure bill, and then, of course, the Farm Bill discussion starts. And as I've mentioned, both the Senate chair and the House chair have said that if they can get a Farm Bill done this year, they'd be happy to do it. Moving into 2018, budget and appropriations process are still going to be issues for us that we're going to have to watch. They're potential threats. And then again, the Farm Bill, if it doesn't get completed this year, will run into next year. For the emerging leaders, Carrie also helped pull together this ELP agenda just to give you an idea of some of the activities that you'll be engaged in throughout your year as an ELP. It's going to include another webinar. We're going to have an executive committee meeting and a fall fly-in where you'll participate. We're going to ask you guys to do some district meetings with your members of Congress back in your home districts and states. We'll be doing a trip out to Kansas City to meet with the risk management agency folks in the Kansas City office, to meet with NCIS, and to meet with some of our coalition partners just for you to learn more about what they do. CIRB annual meeting will be coming up January 31st to February 2nd. We'll have a communications activity in March, and then in April there will be another CIRB Executive Committee meeting and another fly-in here in Washington, D.C. With that, I am done talking at you guys, and I'm happy to take as many questions as I can get through. So if you have questions, please, if you don't mind typing them in now, that would be fantastic. To be honest with you, with all the technical difficulties we had, if you typed in a question at the very beginning of this discussion, I probably don't see it on my board anymore. So if you could retype it, that would be extremely helpful. So First question I have out of the gate, is it right to assume that our priority for the fly-in is going to be to target new members of Congress to tell our story? And will there be a Lobbying 101 session during the fly-in? So for the fall fly-in, we probably will be targeting a lot of new members. Perhaps not all of the traditional Aggies that we usually meet with, but trying to get folks in front of some new faces and some folks that could maybe use a little bit of additional education. We will be doing some very basic Lobbying 101 at this fall fly-in. We will be spending some extra time with the ELPs to be sure you all are comfortable with the process of sort of how lobbying works, and then we'll be doing that again during the spring fly-in. Have the AGI limits gotten any traction in D.C. from what we've heard? AGI limits are a really tough issue because I think a lot of folks' initial inclination is to think of it as a small farmer versus large farmer issue, and if you're a large wealthy farmer, you don't need support from the government. That's sort of the standard line, and that's been what has applied to Title I farm programs and conservation programs in the past, and we have AGI limits on both of those right now. What we spend a lot of time explaining to folks is that crop insurance is different because crop insurance is actuarially sound, and it's all about the risk pools. So you can't just kick farmers out of the crop insurance program without changing that risk pool and changing the premiums for every single farmer that's still left. So I think it is going to be another very real threat we're going to have to deal with during this farm bill. We had 2 floor amendments during the last farm bill. We lost both of those fights, so I don't think it's going to go away. I think we're going to have to continue to fight it. A question about what guidance is going to be provided when you all meet with your local and district leaders. Keep in mind that by then you will have already done your fly-in, so you will already have a little bit of Lobby 101 information and a little bit of guidance on how to do those meetings, and a lot of the same guidance that we're going to give you here in D.C. for your meetings in Washington is going to translate directly over to your meetings back in the district. I have a question about the role of SNAP and a bipartisan approach to passing a farm bill. So there has been discussion about separating the nutrition programs from the farm programs and basically dividing the farm bill into 2 separate pieces. This is an idea that is often espoused by the Freedom Caucus, sort of the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. And I will say that this was attempted in the last farm bill to split them out into 2, and it just flat out didn't work. There is a coalition of urban and rural folks that get together to really get a farm bill across the finish line. And if you don't have that coalition, it's very difficult to envision how you would pass a farm bill. So, for example, when you think about the number of rural districts that still exist today, it's probably not enough votes to actually pass a farm-only farm bill. So we definitely worry about splitting the farm bill being just another way of killing the farm bill. And a lot of the farm groups have already come out and said they oppose splitting the farm bill into 2 pieces. Why is crop insurance a consistent target on the Hill? Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, in the current budget environment, folks are always looking for places to cut. That's just universal on any program. Now that crop insurance has gotten bigger and has really become the second largest component of the farm bill, that's just made the target on the back of crop insurance bigger. Quite frankly, crop insurance wasn't even really part of farm bill discussions until 2008. So it's also I think, a target because it's a little bit more difficult to explain than a lot of other farm programs. But the bigger your program, the bigger the target on your back. With the terrible hurricanes, what do we as CIRB do to show how important crop insurance is during these disasters? Or what can I do for my own state currently to show what good has come from crop insurance and to educate folks? Absolutely, crop insurance wants to be part of the solution when these disasters hit. We have been having discussions internally here in D.C. About how to get the word out that crop insurance is helping during these disasters. There is also a balancing act. We're trying to be very cognizant of the fact that right now or right after these disasters hit, there are more important things than crop insurance, to be blunt. Things like being sure that people have food and shelter and water. So we do intend to leverage that message. We're just waiting for the appropriate time to leverage that message. Also, we're waiting for damage assessments, to be honest with you. For example, a lot of the crops in Texas were out of the field already. So a lot of the losses there might not necessarily be crops that were in the field and crop insurance is going to step in. It might be cotton bales that were actually sitting in a gin waiting to be ginned. So we need to get a better grasp of damage assessments and what the issues are on the ground before we over leverage the crop insurance message. We want to be sure it's appropriate. Are the one-pagers we take to our Hill meetings going to include any current events like Hurricane Harvey? Getting to the same point. The one-pagers that we have right now are not going to mention that. We're keeping those one-pagers and those documents very high level so that they make a difference, not just in an office in Texas or in Florida, but that we can use them in any office. But it's certainly appropriate if you're in a Texas office to talk about Hurricane Harvey, or if you're in a Florida office to talk about Hurricane Irma. Another question, I've seen Secretary Perdue has made comments about school lunches and improving those, farm to lunchroom. Have there been discussions about this initiative being a part of the Farm Bill? I would say yes, there have been some concern, or there have been some discussions around that. That's kind of outside of the crop insurance discussion, obviously, pretty significantly. But the school lunch programs and the school breakfast programs aren't actually part of the Farm Bill. They're part of a Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act. But that doesn't mean they can't be brought into a Farm Bill. So those discussions could very well be part of a Farm Bill. They've also been part of appropriations discussions in the past. The next question, do you have any stats on causes of loss to reflect coverage of losses from drought in the Dakotas and Montana? We do not have any statistics on losses at this point in time. There's always a lag in data that from the countryside to getting to RMA to having full and complete information. So it's going to be a while before we have full statistics, reliable statistics on what loss ratios even are, let alone causes of loss. Any other questions? Going once, going twice? Okay, well, please know that we are always here to be a resource for you at CIRB, so if you ever have any follow-up questions, ever need any information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Give us a call, shoot us an email. Please check out our website. Again, a lot of the materials I've discussed today can be found on the website, and you should feel free to use that information. And thank you so much. Keep in mind also that a recording of the webinar is going to be shared with you via email, so if you want to go back and look at any of those slides, you'll be able to do so. Thanks again so much for your time this morning. I hope all of you all have a great day.